Chair Culver, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members. I'm here to talk about a cooperative effort between academic services and technology, the technology department. And there's really actually a large team behind us, including the community ed folks and the OEE folks and so on. We're talking about, or I'm going to describe for you the first of a two-step plan. This first step tonight is a vision for the next steps in technology, in educational technology for students in Bloomington. I'm going to follow that with a larger team that'll come on March 18th, and we'll have the details of that plan. So if part one is the vision, part two is the roadmap of how to reach that vision. We're talking about part one. There was an executive summary that was sent via email last week that coincides with this presentation, gives a little more detail. This slide is now looking very familiar as I've sat through several of these presentations myself. It is the basis. This is where I would normally start with our mission statement and of helping all students thrive in this rapidly changing world. This to me embodies that mission statement. And it's inclusive, and when I've made this presentation to parents, it's the thing that they can really wrap their arms around. So when I talk about technology, I talk about it in terms of real examples with real kids at various stages in their development, on pathways to graduation towards college and career ready. I'm going to talk about a little bit, so the first part of this presentation is about where we've been. The second part is about where we want to go, the vision for where we want to go. And the third part is just a chance for you to ask questions and to get your feedback. As far as where we've been, the path that I'm talking about is a personalization of learning. In purple, we've done several things in the academic services side that you heard Assistant Superintendent Lennox talk about in terms of PLCs, our long work with PLC work. RTI work, the Matos, based on the Matos Pyramid of Interventions, data and assessment work. In terms of technology, the timestamps on this slide are 2007, that's when we passed our technology referendum. We are 5 years into that technology referendum. We met our original goals. The world of technology changes very quickly, it evolves very quickly, so now is a nice time to refresh. We met our initial goals. Those goals included a replacement of our phone system, evolving our replacement plan so that we stay on a sustainable replacement cycle that doesn't eat up all of our money, and then a large infusion of classroom technology. So you see that in the yellow bar there, smart boards. If you walk into any of our classrooms, you can see some of the evidence of that. You see smart boards in over 60% of our classrooms. You see document cameras in regular use. You see sound enhancement systems being used by teachers. Those are some of the classroom technologies funded through the technology referendum. We've done other work on the pedagogy side of technology over the last 5 years. Some of the significant examples are with hybrid learning, giving students choices that involve taking part of their coursework online and part of it in a face-to-face environment. And most recently, flipped instruction. Flipped instruction is getting a lot of traction among classes as young as 5th grade. This is the idea of a 5th grade math teacher posting on her webpage videos of common procedures that might be encountered in math, like the lattice method for multiplying large numbers, something that I didn't get in my own math background. I'm a former math teacher by trade. I had to go, my sons are in the Minneapolis public school system, but it was through a similar flipped initiative there that I learned how to do the lattice method to help my own sons do their own math homework. So flipped instruction is one of those places where students have that resource, but also parents get engaged in that resource so that they can be full partners in helping us educate their sons and daughters. 2007, the Google tools and the Moodle tool was not here. It was not a part of our regular conversation. When we look at the usage stats of both of those tools, we see an upward slope that does not look like it's plateauing. Just for a baseline reference, Moodle is called a learning management system. It is an online classroom space meant to replicate most of what can be done in face-to-face instruction. It's a secure space, so students have to log in. Teachers can put content there that's copyrighted so that publishers can be assured that they're not posting to the wide open internet. Students can participate in activities like discussion forums. They can pick up work. They can hand in work. There's a test engine, so you can do formative assessment on the fly. The example I use is if we're talking about vocab, for instance, the teacher can put in a library of vocabulary words, and the instructions to students can be, please take this unit's vocab review test until you pass it. What the test generator does is it puts up 10 sample words from the library, and the student has to get 9 out of 10, for instance. And so it's learning toward mastery. That Moodle engine does a very nice job of setting that platform up so that the teacher doesn't end up creating a single assessment, and the student can learn toward mastery. Most recently, last fall, we launched the Hub, not yet 6 months old, getting some traction in terms of connecting students with their homework. I like that term, connecting students with their homework. It allows teachers to post homework, what did we do today, what is due in my class this week, and students can have that live information right in front of them, and parents can log in and have that information in front of them. Lots of room to grow with regard to the Hub. The vision for what we do next in education technology has 3 elements. So element 1 I want to talk about is digital content and personal devices. The takeaway here is that we envision every 5th grader, every 8th grader, every junior in high school carrying a digital device with them, some learning device that they have with them in school and out of school. And on that device would be the majority of their content from their courses. You might call that a digital backpack, and the value that a parent might see is a 34-pound backpack shrunk to a 2.5-pound backpack. It also means that there's no forgetting of the work, there's no, and as an organizational device, students have access to that content in a single container at all times. Which leads to the second element, which is all of those issues around anytime, anywhere learning. Access is one of those. We have a robust internet service when students are at school, but if we're talking about giving students access to this content and wanting them to engage in that content outside of school, we need to look at the access issues around that. It's a very difficult problem to solve. It needs a multi-pronged approach, and we don't have the resources to build a mesh network across Bloomington like the city of Minneapolis took on a number of years ago. It's a very expensive infrastructure project, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything either. We have a pilot in place with Wi-Fi pucks from Verizon so that we could check out internet access points to families out of the media center. We can make evident to families the 39 open access points that are already available within the city limits. They're at Starbucks, they're at McDonald's, they're at those kind of places, but we don't yet have a map that we put in front of students on a regular basis to say, hey, did you know there's a place within a half mile of your house that has internet access? Once we have that map available and we've looked at who has access, who doesn't have access, then let's look at the pockets of need. I think we have the resources, and we can look at as a first phase goal, trying to get every student access within 1 mile of their house, and then 1/2 mile of their house, and then 1/4 mile of their house. So while we might not be able to treat the entire city, we can look at pockets of need and fill in those most needy places. In this category of anytime, anywhere learning is also some of the people initiatives. It includes building on flipped instruction, building on online learning that's taking place, growing both of those initiatives. One of the barriers to any of that progress is usually access and devices. So we had a group of social studies teachers who was excited to look at making some of their own content instead of buying a publisher's content. the big barrier in their way was, what happens when my students leave the classroom? I need to send them home with something. So we're looking at building upon or accelerating some of those initiatives. The third element of this project is student, family, and school collaboration or communication. It's a building on the hub. The hub as a first phase is seeing some traction in the world of homework. We see about 500 students and families a day logging in and checking homework on the hub. The icon there is Dr. Heistad's work in the data behind pathways. Our next project that we met with last week and we're meeting with next week is about how can we take that great data, put it in front of students and families, add some context to it, because getting a 212 on the MCA math test doesn't have a lot of meaning for people unless you give it some context. And then giving families the next steps. So you've got a 212, and it looks like that's a fairly decent score in the preparatory path toward the U of M. What are the next 1 or 2 or 3 things that you should do as a parent or you should do as a student so you can go to that next path or that you can continue on that path? Lots of room there to grow. It feels to me like one of the real benefits of technology is easing those connections between that often keep us apart, because we can get families in for conferences once a term or once a trimester, but what about the big gaps in between? This is a way to get that newest information to those families on a weekly basis or on an instantaneous basis. What does it look like when it's in place? Again, I'm describing the vision. It looks like for students an organizational tool. It looks like access to materials anytime, anywhere. Where we've looked at the logs on the Google tools and the Moodle tools, we see students logging in at 6 o'clock at night, at 10 o'clock at night, at 2:30 in the morning, which is great. They're engaging with their homework at 2:30 in the morning. A continuation down that path. For staff, it means they can plan knowing that the technology is ubiquitous. So that means not having to reserve the computer lab 3 days in advance for an event that has happened in society tonight. Being able to make those educational decisions that allow you to pivot in the classroom and take advantage of a moment, a teachable moment. Does teaching change when every one of my students has access to the internet in front of them? It absolutely does. Sometimes in some anxiety producing ways, and sometimes and usually in some great ways, some great potential there. For parents, we're talking about a more personalization of that data. We have a pretty robust student data site that Dr. Heistad has inherited from Jim Engemeyer. It's allowed him to do a lot of research on where we've been, where we've come. We want to use that data, take the parts of it that have meaning for students and families, and give them access to it, and then continue to add features to that set of data so that our principals and our teachers can continue to make good decisions in the classroom. Across all of these areas, you see a bullet point for increased collaboration, increased communication, and that's never a bad thing. Think about some of the watershed moments in technology and education over my career, over the past 20 years, what email has done to communication for all of us, what having a computer in front of you has done for all of us in each of our own career journeys. We're trying to do some of those things now for students. That is not to say it doesn't come without some pretty big challenges. So the big challenges are, the 3 big challenges that I would identify include access. Those things I've described. It means leaning on some partnerships that we have. We have an infrastructure that is, the technology is ripe to reach into the community and put up a Bloomington access point. So there, for instance, as a side note, there is a device that we can buy that we can put in a church and if the church will provide internet access to plug into the back of that device and a power cord to plug that device in, when a student walks in with a Chromebook or an iPad, it will be on the Bloomington network. That means it gets Bloomington filtering, it gets Bloomington internet access. So that's a technology that wasn't around 5 years ago, but is primed and ready to be implemented as one of those many-pronged approach to solving the access problem. Professional development it always underlies everything we do. We need what we call a soft landing for our staff. When we look at the impact on teaching, when we look at the impact on the transition to, again, having every student have a device in front of them, we want that to be a smooth transition that amplifies instruction and then transforms instruction. We talk about that model, what's called the RAT model, replacement, amplification, and transformation. We're trying to get through those stages in a way that's not jarring to and that doesn't work against the best interests of our staff. We have a great staff development team, professional development team, so it's just a matter of focusing on those efforts, putting the right resources in the right place. And then the third big challenge, I think, is sustainability. We had a laptop one-to-one pilot. It was unsustainable, partly because of cost structure, partly because of tools, for many complicated reasons. What we do now, it is important that we do it in a sustainable way so that we don't, these are investments we're talking about, and we want these investments. There are a lot of heavy lifting in the first years, but then the real payoffs start to build and grow over time. Sustainability means we get through that first cycle, we see improved growth in the second cycle, and then the third cycle, and so on. So sustainability is an absolute must. Some of the big areas that we're looking at in the planning team is really broken down into some of these areas. What devices do students need? How much are the costs associated with all of these different elements? What grades is it appropriate to roll out to? What exactly does that PD support plan look like? And what are the SMART goals around each of these areas that we will use to measure success and then change what we do in the next iteration? The what's next is this presentation that you're seeing, or some version of it's going to about 25 groups. We're probably about 10 into that cycle, really representing all sorts of advisories, parents, students, and et cetera. We will come back here in 3 weeks with a more detailed plan. That plan is being built right now. It will have some very specific things attached to it, upon which then we can decide what are the next steps. We'll share that plan out with all of those constituency groups, and then we'll start to build the foundation for that plan starting in the summer. Talked a little fast, but now is the time to ask questions and comments. When I do this presentation for other groups, I land on this slide. Really, this slide, if you wanted to go to that link, you could. This slideshow is there. I think tomorrow this video will be there, and a feedback form is there. So we're gathering feedback probably from, I want to say maybe a couple of hundred people who will see this presentation in a face-to-face setting, and we're trying to gather all those feedback so we're not surprised, so that we plan accordingly and we get the level of buy-in that we need. And I'm open to your questions.
John, you indicated on the agenda then focus group. Do you have some idea in mind of formal questions or process that you'd like us to give you some feedback, or is you're asking for feedback now from us voluntarily? Is that our focus?
This larger rollout, we're calling a focus group, and so we put that title on this item as well. The focus group is those 2 questions and the feedback form. So if I walk another group through this process, or I have a paper version that I hand out, and we take a 10-minute pause for people to fill out that paper and hand it forward, with or without their name on, with the contact if they want me to contact them personally, or one of our team to contact them personally. You could do the same. This is more of an open format, so we can do the question and answer format. You can certainly go to that link and write a longer form of your feedback. And then if you have specific questions you want official answers for, I could write those out too.
Okay, who needs more information about what is being described here? Dick, do you want to start?
I just have, I'll make this one a short one. If we invite, let's say, I'll use your example of the church as a meeting place. And we have the hardware, they agree to let us plug it in, and when the student walks in with whatever device they have, they're automatically on our filtered website. To turn lights on, it costs money. To keep a building open, you have to have certain staff. Are you anticipating that we would use our staff or the building staff? Do we reimburse the building that the students are coming to for internet access? How does that work?
So my hope would be, in that specific instance, my hope would be, number one, that the group is that we have a partnership with that organization. What we can provide for them on the technical side is, if that church doesn't have wireless access, we can actually give them wireless access in that space. It's their own wired access, but we can turn it into an access point for their own congregation. That would be one give we could do. We've talked about I wouldn't anticipate that we would probably pay their electric bill or pay their internet fee, although we could talk about that as well, because I think it is a give and take relationship. My sense is, and from talking to some of the OEE staff, my sense is we have willing partners. Some of the things they're lacking is the technology, number one, and then the know-how. So we can be the technical support for that Wi-Fi access point, and we can provide the access point for them if they can provide a piece as well. We've talked about community computer labs as another example. You look at an apartment complex where we have a concentration of need. It's my belief that we could get some cooperation between the apartment management and us. We would provide the technology if they would provide the room and some of the infrastructure to have a community space there. We probably would not send one of my staff out to be the supervisor of that room on a nightly basis, but there again, it's a partnership.
Yeah, I can see, it sounds like an interesting idea. I can see, if you get 15, let's just pick on my son, middle school students, and their best intentions are to go get their homework done, but there's 15 of their best buddies sitting over there, and maybe mom and dad aren't there watching them, so somebody has to be there to at least facilitate. They're not throwing paper spit wads or whatever they're going to do instead of their homework.
Right. So yeah. So it really needs to be a fully supervised space. I agree.
Okay, yes, Mark?
So I have a work colleague whose wife is on the Wayzata School Board, and of course they just rolled this out for their middle schoolers.
Yeah.
And we were just having a conversation at lunch today about the fact that a device like the iPad is arguably an entertainment device. Now, there's other developments like the Surface Pro tablet that's, more of a robust device that allows you to do some real work. But one of my concerns, and I see all the benefits. I mean, I know that this is the way things are going to go, but one of my concerns is, are we going to raise generations of kids that have limited attention spans? Because that's what the iPad encourages you to do. You go to this app and you check the sports scores, and then you go to your Google app and you look something up, and you're just constantly so that's a concern, and I hope that we will do our best to address that. And related to that, I'm a little worried about this kind of getting on the bandwagon effect, because everything you read today, whether it's the newspaper or school board journals or whatever, is talking about school districts that are adopting these tools and rolling them out. And I would hope that we are looking really hard at case studies and trying to learn as much about what the pitfalls are. And one is that, for example, in Wayzata, they don't lock those devices. They do in that when they connect, they're connected to the Wayzata school district and it's filtered and all that. But they do allow the kids to load whatever apps they want. So they've got Farmville on there and they've got Angry Birds and that's one of the parents' concerns is, so they walk around with that all the time because it's an entertainment device. And to Dick's point, you know, yeah, maybe they're supposed to be doing their homework, but in fact, they're playing Angry Birds or Farmville. So I don't know if there's any way to control that, but.
Well, I can speak to a couple of those points. Number one, I would say the reason that you see other districts also in this same struggle, certainly people look at their neighboring districts and look to see what's successful and what other districts are doing. My overwhelming sense is that the technology landscape has changed such that people have been looking at one-to-one programs for a long time, and the ingredients haven't really been there. So you see the laptop one-to-one pilots like that in Stillwater and in whole other states. You see them flounder just because they're dealing with a $1,000 device. The tools weren't quite there yet. So these conversations have been going on in the educational and the technology educational community everywhere. I think with the new realm of devices, they're now becoming sustainable. And tools to support them, they're now becoming sustainable. That would be my hope, is that people aren't doing it because it's a bandwagon thing, but they're doing it for the right reasons. The second point I would make is your question or your point about the attention span. I'm not sure how to address that point. Yes, I believe we are creating more and more opportunity to live in a fragmented world. That is true. That is true. On the other hand, our goal and our mission is to give students access to educational content and add meaning and context to it, so that we need to provide them access to the internet, but providing them access to the internet means they also have access to the to the Pokemon website and to this website and to that website. The people side of education is to help steer and guide what that looks like. In terms of devices, the two families of devices that are sort of leading our conversation are the iPad family of devices, like you've described, but also then the Chromebook family of devices. So for those who aren't familiar with a Chromebook looks and feels like a laptop. You open it up, it's silver, just like the ones in front of you. It has a keyboard, so writing is effortless. You log into it. It's the closest I've seen to a technology that's like an appliance, to a computer technology that's like an appliance. Basically, you can pull a Chromebook out of a box, you turn it on, it asks you connect it to a Wi-Fi hotspot, and then it asks you for a login. And you just pick up the student login that you have or the staff login. When you log in, you have access to your Google Docs, your Google Sites, and anything else you've stored in your space, plus the internet. There are some apps there, but it's not the app experience that you get in some of the personal devices that you're talking about, which primarily started as consumer devices and are getting their heaviest use as entertainment and consumer devices. In terms of low technical support and on task, a Chromebook is 2 steps ahead of an iPad in that endeavor. Plus it has a suite of management tools behind it. So Google's done a nice job of providing the management. So even if this student takes this laptop on their vacation to Duluth over spring break, when they log in, they're not on our internet, but they are logging in using their school credentials, and that means there is a log attached to their work. So it's that level of control. It's not too big brotherish, in my opinion, but it is a device that's focused on doing some straightforward things in a simple way.
Okay. And then my last comment is just, and I know you know this because you touched on it, but we can't create a class of haves and have-nots with respect to access, and that would be one of my great concerns is, you know, my kid can go home and sit in their bedroom and work on their device, but some other kid has to, you know, walk 3 blocks to Starbucks to do their homework. That creates a disparity that I'm not sure is consistent with what we're trying to accomplish here, so.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page. You know, the place I'm describing will come to us, or we will go to it. We know, we've seen it in college. You walk into a college classroom and primarily everybody is on or has access to a computer and the internet. We know that that's coming down, and we know that, I think it's general knowledge that students need that level of ubiquitous access as part of their learning tool. It needs to become natural, like bringing a pencil and paper, having your materials in an electronic format. So I lost my thread. Oh, disparity. So the disparity is if we are setting out initiatives like Flipped and like Hybrid, and teachers are doing courageous and innovative work in putting more of their content online. And we are, by doing the normal work that we do, we are creating a space where people who have access to technology are getting more and more access at home in their bedrooms, and the people who don't have access aren't. So by doing nothing, we're helping create that gap. An effort like this means to address that gap straight on. It means to say, we know that some kids have 2 or 3 devices at their disposal. Yes, they'll have a device provided to them by the school, but also we know some kids have no devices available to them. The bigger win is to provide that device for that student. And then if they have to walk half a mile to get internet access with a device, comparing that to the situation where they have no access outside of the 4 walls of their school, it's a win, in my opinion. With that first group, the first group that already has 3 or 4 devices, the next evolution of this process would be to let them bring one of those devices to school, not have to buy that family another device. Find a way to reasonably let them bring that device to school and not impact, and use those resources in another way. It's probably a phase two of this effort, though.
Thanks.
So what's the city feel about this?
Yeah, that's just my question.
We've talked to, in the 2 years I've been in this position, we've had conversations hosted by Superintendent Fujitaki with city council member, with Hennepin County members. The city is not interested in building a mesh network across, or at least the last time we looked at, the city's not interested in ubiquitous Wi-Fi across the city. Lots of good conversations around that, but it wasn't in their top priorities. Typically, where those things have taken place, they've been led by the city or the municipality in some way. So a partnership there, there's lots of room to partner. We have a fiber network that's pretty robust. The city has lots of buildings and facilities. The county has lots of building and facilities. What we're looking for is partnerships where we can co-use each other's facilities, co-use each other's fiber networks, co-use each other's resources and expertise. That's the basic standing between us and the city.
Lyle?
What percentage of our families, our homes, do not have internet access?
It's a tricky question to find the answer to. We, about, I want to say a year ago, we did a student survey across our secondary schools. We got about, I'm going to see if these numbers are accurate, but about 1,900 students responded. And one of the questions, it was about many questions about technology use in their everyday lives, but one of the questions was, do you have easy internet access at home? And 96% of students across the 5 secondary schools said yes. 4% said they had limited or no internet access at home. You can read some interpretations into that. Does internet access mean that Dad has a computer in his office that I get to use occasionally? Or does internet access mean a smartphone? But it's a baseline for students self-reporting 4%.
So would I be accurate to say that we are trying to address 4% of our community with your anytime, anywhere learning philosophy?
I think we're somewhere between 4% and our free and reduced lunch population of about 39 or 40%. I think it's closer to 4%. I think that's the reality. I think families, even who struggle to make their budgetary needs met, a lot of them will still prioritize internet access as one of those primary needs. So we hear from the OEE staff when we had an access meeting last week, that access isn't nearly as big a problem as it might be perceived to be in the general public. That when you talk about the top 5 things that I need to do for my family, internet access tends to be pretty high up there, even for families in need. So if we have to target 10%, then that might be our first initial target, and then we can build off of that number to see if we've overshot or we've undershot.
Do you intend to survey the student body again?
Yes.
Would you ask the questions, what percentage, or do you have an iPad, or do you have an iPhone? And I
Yeah,
bet that percentage would be right up there to 90%?
It might be quite high as well. We know that, the broader research is that lower income populations tend to get access through smartphones. That tends to be the gateway to the internet. Does a smartphone meet the educational needs of every student? It's a real challenge. So some districts are embracing bring your smartphone to class. It's not a common thing to embrace, and it's a real challenge to be looking out onto a group of students and ask them all to take their smartphones out and try to do educational things, because you speak about the entertainment value of a device. Smartphone is right into that realm. I think there's, the community survey had an incident. It had a question about the number of devices across the general community, and iPads came up to be a common device. So I think there is quite a few of those devices out there. But I don't have my hands on how many.
I would contend that maybe your biggest challenge in this program would be the soft landing for your staff, to train them, to lure them into using technology in an educational mode rather than an administrative mode might be hard.
Right, and there we look at that RAT model. So we look at the RAT model comes out of the University of Minnesota, some research out of the University of Minnesota. Whenever you apply new technology to a system or to a teaching enterprise, the first step is typically replacement. Find a way to do on that device what you do in class. There isn't much savings there, and if you were to glance into that classroom, you might think we spent money on the technology to do this when that task could be accomplished with paper. But hold on for a minute. The next phase is amplification. Teachers start to naturally explore ways to extend what they can do with those devices. So a simple thing when we introduced teacher web pages to staff, made them universally a standard, was that documents started to be put onto teachers' web pages. So that meant that if I'm sick or my child is sick, I can go on and I don't get as far behind. So some of those methods amplify. And then that last stage is transformation. Transformation means I'm now doing things with this technology that I couldn't do before. There was no analog way to do before. When we look at the way that projection units are used in classroom, most teachers, it was an initiative that was received by a few warmly, by the bulk as acceptance, and by a few as like, why are we spending money in this endeavor? Now, if you tried to take away a projection unit from a classroom, or if the bulb goes out, it becomes a near crisis situation because it is an integral part of how we do our work.
Is there a motion to extend the meeting?
You know, I hate to tell you, but it actually goes to 10:30.
All right, thank you. Do you want us to speak to potential strengths and potential challenges?
Yeah, that would be a nice place to go if thoughts come to mind around those two areas.
Do you know what the cost to the city would be to go Wi-Fi citywide?
When we did our survey, we had the folks from Minneapolis come out and look at the square footage of the city, and they ran some rough numbers, and it came back to be $6 million to build and $1 million a year to maintain. A network similar to that in Minneapolis.
Well, they do have the cable franchise to reauthorize coming up.
Right. Right, we've been involved in those meetings.
You said they, who's they, Minneapolis?
The
City
city
of Bloomington.
has to renew their exclusive relationship. That's why we have Bloomington Public Access.
Those conversations have been carefully crafted to limit the conversation to cable access, not to other services beyond the cable provided by the provider. So internet
That's-
access is not part of that
That's
conversation.
the way my internet came into my house.
Right. Franchise agreement covers the cable television service, doesn't cover the internet service.
How do we propose damage or loss to the, let's say we use Google's version of a notebook and somebody sits on it, or I mean, the kids can find creative ways to make
Right.
things not work.
Right, so when we had a laptop one-to-one pilot program, the 24/7 version happened right here at Oak Grove Middle School. 125 of our seventh graders were carrying those laptops, the white laptops similar to the ones you had before, these silver ones. We're carrying them with them every day. We just planned for the increased repair cost when you go from a 6-hour usage to a 14-hour usage. What we found was, yes, indeed, things get broken when they get taken home and put in backpacks and thrown on the bus, or, backpack gets thrown into a bus seat and so on and so on. It happens. Where there's negligence, the things that we put in writing are where there's negligence, we reserve the right to assign that cost to the family. In reality, that's quite difficult to do. What we typically do is we build in either an insurance cost, so there's lots of programs that we can subscribe to that are for less than $50 a year. For less than $50 a year, we can have a no-fault replacement cost around a device that's around $300 to $400. So whether the family takes on that cost or we build it into one of the costs of this endeavor, we can discuss that. But that's one way to deal with that. We can self-insure, certainly, and just plan for, based on what we know, how many of these devices are going to come back, or we can go out to one of these reinsurers and then insure the devices. That's a common strategy in other districts as well.
Do we have any kind of protocol in mind for, if the student is waiting to see how many times it can be broken or the battery can be drained and replaced before there's some sort of punishment, I'll take that away if you do that again type of thing. Is there any type of, anything in mind for when you hand these out to the students, when they check them out, whatever the protocol will be, if you get 2 new batteries or you get to sit on it twice this year and anything after that, you don't get it? I mean,
Yeah, we have some, we did quite a bit of learning in the previous pilot, so we have procedures there to lean on. But you're describing what is a common circumstance in a small number of cases, where either students can't handle, they're just not in a place in their life where they can handle carrying around a $300 device, or they're purposefully misuse the device. The slope to roll out these devices might be that you get it while you're in school, bracketed by the 6 hours that you're in school and you're under a supervised state, that everybody starts in that state, and then you earn the 24/7 access. And then when you're in that 24/7 access state, you can be restricted back to the school access state and down to the paperwork state. So there are processes in place, as well as, we talk about the soft landing boot camps. We have a pretty well documented boot camp for students. What's the common procedures that help make these tools effective in the classroom, and a boot camp for staff. What are the common ways teams or departments or groups of teachers can effectively utilize these devices to do some of the operational work that goes on in a classroom, and then to extend on to do some of the educational amplification.
Okay. Potential strengths and potential challenges. Anybody want to take those on?
I'm pretty sure we were just talking about one of the challenges. If it's a physical one, certainly.
Do we need our 10 minutes to write down our ideas? We'll
You
have
do
something
not.
to discuss.
You can take it home as an assignment,
Mhm.
and I'll check the timestamp
Okay.
of when you log in.
Give me a device that I can take it home and write on.
The
and
one you got right in front
send
of
it
you.
to Okay.
I'll wrap up.
All right.
If there aren't any other further comments, you can certainly interrupt me here, but we'll be back in 3 weeks. Again, the components are some of those that you saw in the bubbles. They are how to deal with professional development, where is the best place to start, is this a 3 through 12 initiative, is this a K through 12 initiative, does this extend to early childhood and up into the Metro South program? There's lots of questions to answer there. Really, the growth we'll take our first best planning, and then we'll iterate and iterate. So around each of those areas, you'll see SMART goals that are time-bound, that are measurable, and then our next task is to, where we don't find effective growth, readdress. Where we do find effective growth, expand. We'll see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.